Well, hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I'm back. I hope you guys are doing wonderful. I've got an interesting video for you today. Today we're going to be talking about knives. As many of you that follow my channel know, I have done a series of knife reviews in my history of having this channel. Some manufacturers will reach out to me and they'll ask me if I'm interested in reviewing their knife. Sometimes I tell them yes, sometimes I tell them no. And I've had some good knives that have came in, and I've had some knives that were complete junk. Now in this video, we are talking about a custom knife maker. I've had a few people that were custom knife makers that have reached out to me in the past, and some of them, you know, I told them yes, I would review the knife. Some of them I told no. And I will say in this video today that this is the first time that I've had a custom knife maker that I said yes, I will review your knife, that actually came through and produced the knife. So today's knife, again, not to reiterate too much, but this is a person that reached out to me and asked if I would take a look at one of the knives. So I am holding the knife right here in a sheath. This is the Kydex custom-made sheath that the individual made. The gentleman's name is Kenney. His channel is Metal Man Productions. And this knife is fantastic. The person tuned in on one of my live streams and had been asking, you know, like if you could have a knife built, what kind of specs did you want, and things like that. So I gave the guy a rundown of some of the specs of what I look for in a knife, and I'll be dang if he didn't deliver. Not only did he deliver on the specs that I was looking for, but he also delivered in bringing this knife to reality and getting it shipped to me to review. So let's take a look at this sheath real quick. So this is a custom Kydex sheath. If I shake, it's got a tiny bit of wobble. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a heat gun, heat this up and clamp this down a little bit tighter so I can eliminate that rattle. Now, I'm not knocking the dude at all. I'm just saying I noticed there's a little bit of rattle. The thumb ramp here on the sheath is fantastic. It's positioned very well. It's very effective, and the bite that the sheath has on the knife to hold it in is very effective as well. The knife is definitely got good retention. On the bottom of the sheath you see a couple drain holes, and just very good quality craftsmanship that this guy put into this blade. I mean, this knife and the sheath and everything. Now, one thing I'll personally say is this leather is fantastic. But in my opinion, and it's just me, it's nothing wrong with this leather, but in me, I'm very rough on my knives, and personally, I think that this leather would break eventually. For me, I'm very rough on my knives. I would have rather seen some kind of Kydex loop or something like that that would hold this up. But the craftsmanship and the work that this guy put into this is fantastic. This knife fits the criteria that I look for in a knife, and I'll be honest with you, this blade is razor sharp. I mean, this thing is sharp. These handle scales here that you see, look at those liners and look at that quality. This is a full tang knife. I don't have a measurement out here, like I don't have a tape measure, but I would say that this blade is probably 5 inches in length, maybe 5.5. The thickness of the blade is somewhere between 3/16 and about 1/4 inch, and it's got a nice sharp 90-degree spine so that I can use that. Got a lanyard hole. These micarta handles are made from construction paper, different colors, and look at that design. That is just beautiful. This blade is fantastic, and it is sharp. Look at that. That is beautiful. The way the handles came out, with the liners and everything like that. I'm a big fan of full tang knives. Look at that beautiful job on that lanyard hole. One thing that I did notice right off the bat is it fits my hand very good because I have big hands. However, I would have rather seen a little bit more meat right here, like a bump, so that I have a little bit more purchase. But the size of the handle is fantastic. On the very tip of the blade, and I don't know if the camera's gonna pick it up, but on the very tip right here, there's a small imperfection in the steel. I don't know if you're seeing that. It's very minute. And I'm pointing that out because in this review, I'm gonna beat the crap out of this knife. So I want you to see that right now so that you know it's not some damage that the knife incurred during this test. But this knife, from what I understand, is made out of spring steel from a railroad spring. And I really like the way this thing looks. What's everybody doing? So let's go ahead and test this knife. You're probably wondering what I'm doing with this piece of wood. We've got the SE class coming up this weekend, so I thought I would come out and pick up some aspen wood so that the students can practice friction fire. This is a very forgiving wood, but look at that detail in that from where the bugs have chewed it. Pretty crazy. So my objective in testing this knife today is to see if it will work well in making a friction fire set. So I'm going to take this small piece and test this wood to make sure not only am I testing the knife, but to make sure that this wood is good for friction fire. The blade length, it's right at 6 inches. If you want to go a little further, you could say 6.5, but the actual working blade all the way up to this tip is about the 6-inch mark, and the knife overall is around 12 inches. So it's a very good sized knife. 12 inches, and the thickness of the blade is 3/16 of an inch thick. We've got some wood right here. First thing I want to do is I want to test the tip of the knife. So I'm going to do some hammer stabs in there. I hate doing this test, but I'm just testing the tipness, the hardness of the tip rather. So far, no bending. This is not a test by any means that I like to do. But any good knife should have good tip strength, and so far so good on this knife. Let's push it. I'm going to push it kind of violently away from the camera. Nothing, no problems. I'm also testing the handle as I stab the knife in the wood to see how the handle feels. There's not really any hot spots that I can tell. But this thing's just chewing the wood up with no problems. So the tip strength of this knife is fantastic. This blade, the tip is perfect. There's no issues on the strength of the tip. This is a very unforgiving test. I've tested knives in the past that have broken during this test, and so far we're passing with flying colors. The next test is going to be batoning, because I'm going to be making a friction fire set. So this piece of wood here, I'm guessing probably 2.5, 3 inches, 2 3/4 inches in diameter, and let's baton this through. Looks like my baton doesn't want to hold up. I need a stronger baton. I got a little thicker piece. I'm just testing the geometry of the blade to see how well it batons through this wood. Wow, it popped that piece out there with no problems. Now what I want to do is I want to go down something like this. What I'm making is a hearth right now. Pop that baby down. Yeah, it's going right through this wood. There's a nice clean baton. Now let's test the initial sharpness of this blade. So far, so good. There's a knot right there, so I'm kind of running into some issues on that. Looks like it did good as a chopper. So very nice. I'm impressed so far. The initial sharpness is very good. In fact, I think I'll make this piece my hearth, and then I'll get my baton out, my spindle rather, out of this piece. So this is going to be my hearth, and I'm not making like a big old fancy friction fire set by any means. I'm just testing this knife and testing this wood, because this is the wood that I plan on taking to the SE class this weekend. So this is, the knife is doing very good. The initial sharpness is outstanding. The balance of the knife, the way the handle feels, the strength of the knife, the geometry of the blade, the tip strength, everything so far is absolutely fantastic. I'm going to do one more little baton. I want to take some of this fine stuff off, clean it up a little bit, get this piece a little straighter. There we go, that went very well. So now I'll have a little piece to catch my ember if possible. So I got my catch, I have a hearth, and let's go ahead and drill. So I'm going to kind of hammer stab, and we're going to test the drilling ability of this blade to see what kind of hole the shape of the blade puts into the wood. That's fantastic. That is an A+ right there. The diameter of the blade, of the hole here, is perfect for starting a spindle for my burn-in. So this is fantastic. This knife is absolutely fantastic. Now I want to try the spine. I want to test the spine of the knife to a ferrocerium rod for sparks. Looks like it's doing good. I'm going all the way down to the tip here. There's the tip of the blade right there. Sparks, let's move up about an inch. Sparks, let's move up to about the mid-belly portion of the blade. Sparks. Let's move up to about here. Sparks. And right up here, right up close to the grip. Perfect. Very nice. So the spine of the knife is absolutely fantastic for scraping my ferrocerium rod. So I really like that, because that tells me that in the event that I had to scrape barks or material off of a tree, that I have a sharp enough spine to be able to do those tasks. I really like the way this knife is performing so far. Now I'm going to go ahead and get into this other piece and try to work out some sort of spindle, but I got a little bit of an issue here because there's a knot. So I'm going to try to stay away from that knot and baton about right here. Hopefully get myself a spindle out of this. Okay, so this piece here. So I've got my hearth, my catch, and potentially a spindle out of this piece. I just got to get it nice and round, or at least rounded. Start kind of shaping it. But the knife has a good balance to it. It has a good feel to it. Okay, so far so good. Let's start carving away. I love this. The knife is working very good. Blade is sharp. Let's try some of these chest type incisions. These remove a lot of material, and they also give you a good feel of how the handle of the blade is going to perform. This little hook right here is working good. It's keeping my hand in connection with the blade. So the portion of the spindle that I'm making right now is going to be the portion that will go into the hearth.
So I'm just trying to remove a lot of material, and then as I get closer to this becoming a point, I'm going to start getting steeper on my angle, like the eraser on a number 2 pencil. Something like that. Now from here I want a long taper. I want the pencil area, the long taper, because this is the area that's going to go up into my bearing block. So long taper, and this knife is doing very good work. The blade is sharp, the feel of the knife is secure. I don't feel like the knife is going to fly out of my hand or it's going to slip or anything like that. I think Kenney did a fantastic job with this knife. Actually nicked my finger right there a second ago. Going to town there. Just a little tiny little nick right there. But the knife is doing wonders. Let's finish up this spindle. This taper needs to be a long gradual taper because it's going to fit into my bearing block. So it needs to be able to fit right in there like so. So I'm almost there. But I really like the way this knife is performing out here today. Very good. So that looks good. Now let's thin out the belly of this thing a little bit. It's a little thick, so I'm just removing some material. Trying to round it off a little bit. It's looking like it's a pretty good little knife. And my baton, or excuse me, my spindle is definitely starting to take shape. I think we're close to burning this bad boy in, and maybe even trying for an ember here soon. So I just want this tip here to be a little bit blunt, like that, and this one tapered. But yes, so far this knife is performing very well. I'm very impressed, and it's still sharp. You can feel that it's still sharp. The spine feels good. Feels like good steel. I love the micarta handles. Wow, I'm gonna go ahead and burn this in now. Okay, I had to come over here by the car because it's pretty windy out today. So I've got my bow here. Okay. Very good. So now I have a nice burn in. So I'm going to take my knife now and I'm going to get rid of this little tip here that was formed. Get rid of that little tip. And now I'm going to make some small facets. The purpose of the facets is to create traction or friction. So something like that. And I'm checking the tip here for I'm going to leave this black portion right here because the tip here is fire hardened or heat hardened, so I don't want to get rid of that. Now what I need to do is cut my V-notch. So I like to take the blade of my knife and mark it to where I want that notch to be. So it's just kind of identifying the lines. And for me personally, the easiest method that I've found for cutting the notch is a small handsaw. So I'm just going to follow those lines. You can use your knife for this if you choose to, but a saw makes it a lot quicker. So something like that. Don't make your notch too big or you'll have to make too much dust. So we have something like that. Now I want the dust to fall into the notch, so I'm going to go, it's probably going to be hard to show on camera, but I'm going to go right there and I'm going to just angle that just a hair so that it encourages the dust to fall. I'm also going to flatten the bottom just a tiny bit, and then I'm also going to cut a little angle here so that this hearth has the ability to have airflow underneath it. Now I'm not going to go and get an ember and everything. I mean, I'm not going to make a full fire is what I'm saying. I'm just going to put my catch down just like so, and I'll make some dust, and in the event that I'm lucky enough to get an ember, I'll show you the ember and we'll call it good, because I'm not trying to make a fire in this windy condition that I'm in right now. So let me go ahead and stand on my hearth here, get good comfortable position, and just go nice and slow. Don't want to go fast until your notch is full of dust. Otherwise you're premature charring. Okay, so we're getting close on my dust. Now I'm going to go for the ignition. Let's see if we have it or not. Yes, we do. We have ignition. And you'll notice the ignition by the fact that it stays smoking. So this is a very weak one. So I'm piling the dust kind of around it. And you have time at this point. Catch your breath. I haven't made an ember since I think October, so it's been a while for me. I got a little tired. But that's what you would take this ember, let it come to life a little more. Take your grass or whatever that you have, your tinder pile, your bird's nest, put it on top and flip the whole thing upside down. I see so many people just dump this into their bird's nest and this falls apart during that process and it puts it out. So that's why I recommend putting your bird's nest on the top of this and then transferring the whole thing over in one motion. But that's it. So I know that this wood is good wood for the class coming up. In fact, last year when we had the class, every student was successful getting an ember with a bow drill. Look at that spindle. And there's my catch. And you can see it's just going away. You got plenty of time. This is what I used for a bearing block. Just a stone that had a hole in it. There's my hearth. My spindle. Okay, you would need to trim this piece off again if you wanted to try for another but I'm pretty much drilled through, so it's probably time for another hole and maybe a new spindle. But I just wanted to test this wood real quick, and as you can see, we are successful. When I am looking at a knife and I want to consider if that knife would be something that I would want to keep and call a survival knife, one of the biggest criteria that I look for is the carbon content in the steel. Is it high enough carbon that if I take a hard stone and bang it against the spine of the blade, is it going to remove material that has a high enough carbon content to create a spark? That spark is not going to necessarily make a fire just from the spark. The spark needs to be harnessed, because the spark that comes off of these knives is between 600 and 800 degrees, and in a lot of cases that spark's not strong enough to actually start a fire on its own, but it can assist and end up with fire. Again, if you bang the rock against the spine, small pieces of steel will be removed from the knife, and hopefully the steel has a high enough carbon content that it'll be creating a spark as that steel exits the blade. That can be harnessed because those sparks will land in charred material, and then the charred material will harness that energy or that heat, and then you transfer that to your tinder bundle, and then you blow that to flame, and then you have fire. So I'm going to go ahead and test this spine of this knife to see if I can call it a survival knife or not. So you can use hard rocks like flint, you can use quartz, and in my case I have a piece of chert. Okay, so in a last case or worst case scenario, will this knife produce sparks? And as you can see, the answer is yes. So this knife can be considered a survival knife. Now, if you look at the spine of the knife, you're going to see a little bit of damage to the spine of the knife. That is, again, because we're removing material from the knife in the form of sparks. Now, some knives you're still going to remove material, but you're never going to get a spark. So I always test my knives and make sure my spine is a good sharp spine, and that the carbon content of the blade is high enough that it'll produce sparks as that material is removed. The cool thing about this knife is it passes that test with flying colors. So at this point, I can honestly say that I can trust this knife with my life. In the worst case scenario, I bang a hard rock against the spine and produce a spark. Now, don't think for 1 second that damage that you see on the spine of the knife, don't think for 1 second that is a reflection on Metal Man Productions or Kenney's knife making skills. Every single knife that I've ever banged a rock against, whether that knife produced a spark or not, they have all taken damage to the spine. So here I have a handful of knives that I want to show you. These are all knives that have taken rocks to the spine. Here is the Condor bush lore. Look at that spine. See that? This knife produces sparks. Not the best sparks in the world, but it does produce sparks. Here is a Mora Garberg in the carbon steel version. Look at that spine. This one produces fantastic sparks. Mora Garberg. Right here we have the Becker or the Bk7. This is a knife designed by Ethan Becker. Solid knife. Look at the spine there. This thing produces fantastic sparks. It's 1095 high carbon steel. Right here we have the Becker Bk7. Again, look at that spine. This thing produces fantastic sparks. It also works very good for scraping materials, barks and things like that, to make tinder bundles. Right here we have the Condor Sequoia. This is 1075 high carbon steel. It doesn't produce as good as sparks, but it will in the event of like a survival situation. Okay, so this is a fantastic knife. And then lastly, my SE 6, 1095 high carbon steel, produces fantastic sparks. So you just hold that knife just like so, get your rock. It produced just as good, if not better, sparks than Kenney's. So Kenney's knife is on par with all these other knives as far as creating fire. Now, one thing that I'll need to do with Kenney's knife that I do with a lot of my knives, I haven't done it yet, is in the micarta handles, I need to drill a bow drill socket so that I can put my spindle and let it spin and ride in that socket in the event that I have to create friction fire like I did in this video. So you're probably wondering what my final thoughts are on Metal Man Productions knife. I'll tell you what, I really like this knife. I think Kenney has done a fantastic job. I mean, the whole blade is sharp. From the tip of the blade all the way to the end of the blade. It's just sharp everywhere. Obviously, I was able to make fire from using this knife. I want to say thank you to Kenney Metal Man Productions for sending this knife out for review. I hope that everybody out there watching has enjoyed this video today. Now, a knife like this, if I was ever to be selected for a show such as Alone, I would take something like this with 100% confidence that it's going to work for what I need it to work for, and that is survival. So I think Kenney did a home run with this knife. I would have maybe asked for some Kydex up here instead of this leather, but you know, honestly, I just keep my knives like that anyway, and I just throw them in a pack. I don't carry them around, especially bigger knives like this. Just something to protect the blade, and he's done a fantastic job. I would be confident in taking this pretty much anywhere in the world. Thing about this knife is just, it's amazing when somebody makes something for you and it's personalized, you know. I'm just blown away right now. Some of you might be wondering, what would a price point look like on a knife like this? Personally, I would pay anywhere $100, maybe even $200 for a knife like this. Please feel free to check the description box down below, because I'll put a link to where you can find Kenney Metal Man Productions. I think this knife is just absolutely fantastic, and I'm honored that he sent this for me. I mean, it's just, it's done everything I needed it to do today. It passed all these tests with flying colors. It's a fantastic knife. So with all that being said, folks, again, thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you have a beautiful day. We will see you next time. And now that I know that this wood is good for friction fire, I'm confident in giving it to the students so that they can hopefully get their first embers.